First things first, growing up in Canada. That's where you grew up, where you were born. Talk about life in Canada before you moved down to the States.
It was pretty quiet. We lived in Niagara Falls, Ontario for a while, up until I was about 3-4 years old, and then moved out kind of like the country, this little town called Port Colborne. But like we didn't have like neighbors close by or anything like that. We played outside. There was 4 of us. I had an older sister, 2 younger brothers, and my mom gets sick and tired of us. Go outside and play. That's what we did. We climbed trees. I remember helping my uncle and stuff bale hay, like when we were kids. Like, it was our family. We stayed very close because we didn't have all the distractions around us.
So the fact that you're living on a farm per se, you're baling hay, did it turn into this tomboy situation where you were just very aggressive? Not very aggressive, but I can do anything. I don't have to play with Barbie dolls, for example.
Yes and no. I still had that, obviously, more girlier side to me. But yeah, well, my sister kind of moved out at a young age. She went off and did her own thing. So, I hung out with a lot of my brothers and stuff like that. So it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I got a lot closer with my sister. But yeah, that was the thing. Like, I remember, like, I had Barbies, but I also had Ninja Turtles. I had a little bit of both sides, and that's what kind of like drew me into like the outdoors. It's just because I was so used to it. Like we used to go for hikes all the time. Go off and hike up the gorge in Niagara Falls, and it's just still stuff that I love to do today.
So physically active is one thing. You became physically active at a young age, but then what drove you to mixed martial arts?
I think it was just like an interest. I remember going on a field trip, and I think it was in elementary school, and walking by like this kickboxing. And I was like looking in the window, I'm like, what, I kind of, I'd love to, give that a shot. But it wasn't, it was hard. There's 4 of us. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, we always said, and my parents worked a lot. So it was really until I hit high school, started to get my independence, could get a car. It was a friend of mine who said, let's, join this kickboxing place. We kind of wanted to get in shape and try something new, and that's how I fell into it. Just kind of fell in love and kind of transitioned to jiu-jitsu and moved to Muay Thai and doing some judo and doing some wrestling. And
walk me through the first time, you had someone in your guard, because for women it's usually and then the first time you got punched in the face. What was that like?
Yeah, I remember I was kind of nervous at first. I was kind of known as being like tougher in high school, but I never got in a fight. I always like to say I've never been in a fight that I haven't been paid for. But it was just, I remember being a little bit, hesitant to jump into sparring. But, a lot of people were very like, just give it a shot, give it a try. But, I did, and thank God I did. This is where I kind of turned out to be. And I don't know, for jiu-jitsu though, jiu-jitsu is a different story. I was, I remember me and another girl were there. She was actually security at a casino. And she was like really into it too, and I was like just starting out. Was doing Japanese jiu-jitsu, was yellow belt, and like we were, fighting like, we were like blue belts, purple belts. Everybody else was kind of a little bit slower and hesitant, but we were like, just going for any submission that we could get, any position. It just kind of came more naturally to me.
You are in an opportunity now that everybody dreams of, to get that title shot. Then you have the people that come out and say, oh, she got here so quickly. It's an overnight success. The reality is completely different. Can you talk about I can just imagine being offered the title shot, signing it, and looking back and saying, all that hard work has finally paid off. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's been a long road. Like, sometimes I feel like I'm a different person than I was before because I've been through so many different, changes and transitions in my life. Like, I can barely remember how many fights I've had. Obviously, we get to like the boxers and they're like hundreds, but I've kind of had that series where I was still in Port Colborne, and took a lot of my first like 6 to 10 fights were all in short notice. We didn't have a lot of. We didn't have proper weight classes, and you didn't have, you were waiting for somebody to, sorry to say, but to get injured or something like that, or something to happen so you can jump in and fight, It was good, you always had to stay in shape, but, it's different times now. and now I get proper notice. It's great. I know, I knew before time. I got to start watching what I'm eating. Really pumping out my cardio. So it's a great new world now. But once I, kind of get that, I didn't even believe it. I'm like, are you guys sure? I'm like, but I remember as soon as I got the phone call, I was like, okay, but now I got to go train. Now it's time to start moving, time to get to work. I was like right in the middle of doing a Muay Thai class. It was just by that chance that I'm like, no, I'm going to pick up this phone call. So I'm stoked just to be here. It's been, I think I started in 2007, 7 years.
You think about the fact that you could have chosen anything to do in life. You've got that mentality, you've got the right mindset to be successful in anything you do. But you chose mixed martial arts. There had to have been a point where you're like, am I going to do this? Or do I have to go into the corporate world or do something else? What was the final decision maker that you said, no, this is what I'm doing?
You know what, it was, for me, obviously, when I started, we just do it for a hobby. It was just something fun at the time. I think, it was really when I started to get like an offer to start teaching. I started teaching at the academy in Port Colborne, and I was like, nothing really, you have little interests here and there, but nothing kind of, spoke to me. And I was like, what, this is, even if I can't do MMA, or, I can't get to the point where some people are in their career, I'm like, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. I loved staying active, and I loved teaching jiu-jitsu, like teaching kids, and just the technical side of, martial arts. No matter what it is, you're always learning, it's always changing.
So once the belt was announced, I waited for the haters to come out. And I said, here we go. She's going to get it, and it's just going to be relentless. It'll lead up all the way to the fight. A lot of guys and girls tell me different ways of how they deal with it, whether they ignore it or whether they're just like, dude, it's normal. It's just the way it is. I get them as well, just because I'm on TV. How have you dealt with all the negativity?
Just pretty much ignoring. I know it doesn't matter. You're, like you said, like where you are in your life, or, if you're in the public eye, they're either going to love you or hate you. I can imagine all, the messages or, the tweets or whatever Ronda gets. She's got a huge following, and half the people, want to see her go down. The other, want her hand raised at the end. Like, it just comes with the territory.
So now you were in a role, obviously, when you look at the odds makers, the betting public will go heavy on Ronda and be scared to bet on you, so you're going to be a heavy underdog. As an underdog, like Dan Henderson told me yesterday, he's like, it's the first time, I love it. He's like, this is actually more fun. It's almost like there's less pressure. As the underdog, how do you think you'll feel as you lead up to the fight?
Oh, I always love being the underdog. I guess it's it's the part of the quiet Canadian in me. I don't mind sneaking under the radar and let them have all the attention on Ronda. It just gives me more time to focus on my fight and focus at the things I need to get done.
Why does Alexis Davis deserve this title shot?
I've been doing it for a long time. I've been, undefeated in the UFC. I fought some of the toughest women that are in this sport, even, in my weight class, or, I fought some that weren't even in my weight class. But I think it's about time. I think I've earned it. If you know anything about me, I've worked up to this point. I didn't just come from the wayside and get thrown into the mix.
Ronda has taken, or helped take this sport. She took it from Gina and became the face of women's MMA, and is becoming, quote unquote, bigger than the sport, the Hollywood stuff there. What's your take on Ronda Rousey?
At first, like you say, I was a hater. I was a hater at first, I'll admit to it, but there's, a lot more respect that comes with it. And, you hate to admit it, especially in the beginning, but she has taken this sport, far. Like, I've been doing it obviously longer, but, whether she was pushed into it or, she just kind of took off with it. Whether it's been, in movies or just the sport itself, we've gotten more and more recognition, for women in general. Like now we're having, the different weight classes kind of come up. So it's it's really great, you know, and the more successful she is, the more successful I think it gets for the rest of the women in this sport.
But if you beat her, the face of women's MMA could change in July. Is that something you want? Can you handle that? Do you want to handle that? Or do you want to be like Sarah McMahon, who's like, no, I don't want to do any of this stuff. I just want to fight.
Well, yeah, there's, you know, obviously, if I had my way, I just want to fight. But, you know, in order to get that title shot, to win that championship belt, there's a lot of responsibility. You know, what's that? With great power is great responsibility. So you have to take it. You have to accept it. You know, and I'm prepared for that. You know, whether it's going to cut down on my training time, and you know, obviously it's a little bit harder on your family, but you know, you only get to do this for so long.
What is your, I mean, we can look at Ronda Rousey on the surface level, and the way I look at Ronda Rousey is she's improved by leaps and bounds, not just from her judo, but the way she sets up her armbar, the way she sets up her strikes. It's the Sarah fight. I think she was losing the boxing battle. She switched to Muay Thai, and she started using the knees. I think the evolution of Ronda Rousey is beautiful to watch, but now it's your time to scout her and look at her. What is your scouting report on her?
Oh yeah, it's incredible. You know, with every fight, she grows and grows. You know, we first kind of see her pretty much only using the judo, but now she's kind of transitioned and moved into a different side, you know, more the actual MMA side of the sport. And like I said, like you see in the last fight, she didn't finish with her armbar. You know, she finished with the knee. And that's the one thing that, you know, you can't help but notice is that, you know, she gets into a position where she's getting stuffed and stopped, and you know, it takes that split second and she's moving on to something else. You know, that's what I think has a lot to do with her judo background, because you know, you're not successful in the first throw. You can't sit there for 2 seconds and try to figure out what you're going to do next. You have to automatically move to the next one. You only have a certain amount of time. So that's what makes her so dangerous, is that she can switch to one thing to the other, and just the sheer explosiveness of her. So, you know, in order for me to beat her, that's something that, you know, I'm gonna have to capitalize. Something I have to work on a lot of myself is getting ready for that explosiveness and get ready for that switch change. You know, is she gonna go to boxing, switch to Muay Thai, or just go back and resort to judo?
What makes you so dangerous for Ronda Rousey?
You know, it's the fact that I train with world champions every day, whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or if it's Muay Thai. You know, I come out of 2 very good academies, CSA in Dublin, where there's a whole list, 10, 20 Muay Thai world champions. You know, you get me in a position where we're standing on our feet, whether it's boxing, going for the clinch, or, you know, going for sweeps, that I've been there before. You know, I've had people knee me and elbow me and take me to places that, you know, I didn't want to be. And then again, you hit my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu side. Train over at Caio Terrace. I believe he's like an 8-time world champion. So, you know, whether you like it or not, you know, they're not going to take it easy on you. You know, half the time, you know, they're training for a competition as well. You know, just the other day, I think I still got a little bit of a shiner in there. I'm still, you know, they're still pushing me. They're putting me in positions where you don't want to be, you're not comfortable with, but that's what you have to do to take it to the next level, especially if you're going to fight someone like Ronda, who you know is going to put you in those positions.
So it's funny you say that. The bout gets announced, my Twitter explodes. Showdown, you know, it's Ronda Rousey, armbar, first round, Alexis Davis. And, okay, which part of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt don't you understand? So when you start reading that stuff there, I'm sure it doesn't affect you, but because of Ronda's setups, what would you train more? Not getting caught in that, like the old Brazilian adage, don't be caught in that position? Or the fact, yes, I'm going to get caught in that position, and here's how I'm going to escape this armbar, whether it's from side, from this, from that, blah, blah, whatever grip she has. Where will you dedicate your training more? Is it a mixture of everything?
It's kind of a mixture of everything. You know, even, you know, obviously I'm studying a lot of judo as well. You know, not even getting to the point where I go down to the ground, I want to go on my own terms. But I think people are looking past Ronda a lot. Like, I feel like everybody's like asking about the armbar and stuff like that. But I'm like, do you guys remember the McMahon fight? Too, you know, she's kind of changed as a fighter, where she's not just always going for that armbar, that she's looking for any position where she can get, you know, a win, a knockout, or submission. So obviously I'm going to train a lot for the armbar, which, you know, not getting the position, but also, you know, fortunate enough to know more than one way to escape out of it, even to escape out of head and arm. You know, she does it great from mount, or, you know, from on the ground when you're in a turtle position on your hands and knees. You know, she's dangerous from more than one area, and that's the beauty of fighting, is you can't just train for one thing, one position. I can't just train for the armbar. You know, for all I know, she's going to try to knock me out.
Do you feel like you're going to represent Canada in this fight?
Yeah, I think I can represent Canada no matter who I'm fighting in there. I miss being back home. It's hard, you know. Everybody's like, well, now you're living in the States, but true Canadian. I'm back home. I still say my about's the same way. But I'm proud to be Canadian, and I'm glad to say, you know, I can be the first female Canadian UFC champion.
Carlos Newton, George St. Pierre, Alexis Davis. How sweet would that be?
That would be awesome.
What would a women's champion, a ladies champ from the UFC, what do you think it'll mean to Canada? Because I'll tell you what I think it'll mean. Stardom. I think it'll mean stardom, to be honest with you, because the country will embrace you. If you are the one that takes out Ronda Rousey by whatever magic by armbar, since you're a black belt, like, can you imagine? So I think a superstar could be born. What do you think it would mean, though, for a lady representing Canada to become a women's champ in the UFC?
You know what? I feel like, you know, me, obviously I'm a little biased, but I feel like, you know, they have embraced me as I am now. You know, I just think it will take it to the next level. You know, I'm proud. I'm hoping, you know, when we get back after, you know, July 6th, or after all the press is done after, that I can take that belt back home. And, you know, even just to go back to my small town, you know, saying, you know, you don't have to be put, you know, you're stuck in that small town mentality where people feel like they can't leave, you know. And it doesn't matter where you are in life, if you have the drive to do it, that you can get out and do or be whatever you want to be.
Do you have any Canadian inspirations, sporting-wise?
Oh, well, like GSP, of course. You know, the fact that, you know, he was not just a great champion, but the fact that of the way his personality is set. You know, he's not a cocky guy. He's not, you know, someone who is looking to bolt out into stardom. He's an athlete, pure athlete. He trains, I don't even know how many different, I swear, I think I heard that every fight he learns something new. You know, he's something, you know, a lot of us, I think, you know, whether you're American or Canadian, can aspire to be someone who is dedicated to the sport and just learning, you know, being an athlete.
Back to Ronda, back to the fight. Why will you win this fight?
I'll win this fight because nobody thinks I'm going to win it. Well, can't say nobody. But because, you know, I'm under the radar. You know, people don't realize that the positions and skills I have. I'm very determined. You know, I can be the quiet Canadian, but I'm training hard. I've pushed myself to put myself in those positions, and I'm gonna admit, Ronda's dangerous. You know, she gets more and more dangerous with every fight she has. But I feel like I have the skills that nobody else has had to put her in those positions.
Whenever I talk about you and Sarah Kaufman, I get depressed because I don't like seeing you two do what you did to each other. So we talk about Ronda right now. I want to ask you if you had a perfect Hollywood script to win this fight. I'm hoping you don't say a 5-round war, but if you had a perfect Hollywood script that'll send, I mean, the headlines would be crazy on Sunday, what would it be?
Oh, obviously, if I won by like an armbar, that would be a huge Hollywood blowout right there. But definitely a submission win, if anything, you know, to put her, you know, in a position where she's going to have to tap, you know, for someone who has been through several great opponents, you know, like Kaufman, you know, she's even fighting at, you know, 145, she fought Sarah DeLelio, and then we have McMahon, you know, Carmouche, Tate twice, and to all have those quick finishes, you know, I think that would be, you know, obviously the perfect win right there.
I'm not the one that steps in the octagon. I don't have to fight her, or any dude for that matter. But I've got my theories on the errors that people have, that ladies have made against Ronda, what do you think has been the difference in Ronda winning versus Ronda losing?
Well, we all make errors in fights. You know, there's no, well,
Punched.
very rarely you have that perfect fight.
Yeah.
You know, but the thing about Ronda is, like, she knows how to capitalize on that smallest mistake. And, you know, she's made several mistakes in her fight too, but she's able to move in transition out of those mistakes and kind of put herself in a better position. And just, you know, her sheer determination, you know, she has that, you know, that push, that mentality to not stop, not to back. Even when we watched the last Tate fight, get into the third round, they're both, you know, they were going at, you know, a very, very good pace, and they were both looked like they were getting tired. But I just think it was, you know, whose will was going to win at the end.